What if the greatest map of the human mind was drawn by a man who everyone thought had gone insane? A respected Swiss psychiatrist who began speaking to invisible beings, writing down their answers, and descending deeper into darkness every single night. Not because he had lost his mind, but because he had chosen to find it. Tonight we go back to the very beginning. To a boy in Switzerland who felt split in two. To a young doctor who walked into an asylum with one suitcase and walked out with discoveries that would change how we understand every human being alive. This is Carl Jung, and this is where it all began. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Carl Jung wrote words like these after stepping willingly into a state that looked, from the outside, like madness. For 4 years, he said, he spoke with invisible beings and wrote down their answers. He was a respected Swiss psychiatrist who risked everything on visions that looked indistinguishable from psychosis. His colleagues whispered that he had lost his mind, but Jung kept going deeper, darker, and farther inward until he emerged with something like a map of the underworld. Before we begin, a quick note from Rohit, the creator of history's dark biographies. This channel is built on research, writing, editing, and a lot of time spent uncovering stories from the darker side of history. If you enjoy these documentaries and want to help keep them going, you can support the channel through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Your support helps me continue making deeper, better, and more detailed stories for everyone to enjoy. As a member, you may also get early access, special updates, and the chance to help choose future topics. Thank you for being here and supporting the journey. Now, that terrifying gamble with sanity that Carl Jung chose becomes our guide into the inner worlds we are so often taught to fear. Have you ever had a recurring dream you could not explain? Felt drawn to people you knew were wrong for you? Or sabotaged your own success and wondered why? In this episode of Bedtime Biographies, we explore how one man's journey suggests that the answers may lie in the place we are trained to avoid, our own darkness. Tonight we follow Jung's life to understand the map he brought back for all of us. By the end, you will see that his voluntary descent into madness and his return from it carries keys to understanding your own depths. This is the Bedtime Biography of Carl Jung. Chapter 1. The Swiss Soil. Carl Jung was born in Switzerland on July 26, 1875, and the character of that country shaped nearly everything he became. To understand Jung, you have to understand the land that formed him. Switzerland was, as one writer described it, a kind of national park of the spirit. It was a place where citizens voted directly on major issues, where personal responsibility ran deeper than in many nations, and where instinct and nature mattered more than urban sophistication. For more than 400 years, Switzerland had turned inward, choosing its own political quarrels over wars with outsiders. Because of that, Jung grew up without the habit of imagining evil as something that only lived in neighboring countries. The Swiss were used to turning inward when conflict appeared. That national tendency toward self-examination became one of the foundations of Jung's understanding of the psyche. He would later call it the confrontation with the shadow. Jung was deeply Swiss. He served eagerly in the army, which he saw as an anchor to his identity during the most disorienting periods of his inner life. The practical, grounded nature of Swiss life helped keep him connected to reality, even when his mind moved into places that might have swept someone else away. He was a product of that soil, practical, but also deeply inward-looking. His childhood unfolded first in the quiet riverside town of Keswil, and later in Klein-Hüningen near Basel. Roman ruins rested along the Rhine, vineyards spread out in sleepy green under the summer sun. But beneath that peaceful surface, the boy was already living through inner events that would mark him forever. Between the ages of 3 and 4, Jung had a dream that would remain with him throughout his life. He descended stone steps into the earth and entered an underground chamber where he encountered something that terrified him, a giant flesh-colored figure sitting on a golden throne. His mother's voice called it the man-eater. That dream introduced him to what he later called the secrets of the earth. It was the beginning of his inner life, a preview of the creative force that would drive him. By age 11, Jung already felt split in two. There was personality number 1, the ordinary schoolboy who struggled with mathematics and disappointed his teachers. Then there was personality number 2, a wise and timeless presence who seemed to belong to the 18th century. This was not madness. It was his first intuition of the relationship between the everyday ego and something larger, older, and more enduring within. Around that same time came another vision that would shape him. One day, while sitting outside Basel Cathedral in the sunlight, he struggled against a thought that kept forcing its way into his mind. For days he resisted it, then at last he surrendered. He saw God seated on a throne above the cathedral, and then God dropped a huge, filth-filled mass that shattered the church below. Instead of fear, Jung felt overwhelming bliss. He understood something essential. The divine could not be contained by human tradition. God held both creation and destruction. These experiences left him profoundly alone. He could not tell anyone about them, not his father, who preached without conviction, not his mother, who had her own moments of strange withdrawal, and not his schoolmates, who lived in a different world entirely. That isolation became both his burden and his strength. It forced him to develop an inner life of extraordinary depth. The Swiss soil had produced something unusual in Carl Jung, a boy who thought in images rather than words, who experienced the divine as wild and contradictory, and who felt himself connected to something ancient moving beneath the orderly surface of Swiss life. That foundation would support everything that came after. His break with Freud, his descent into the unconscious, and his discovery of the collective patterns that shape all human experience. Chapter 2. Two Personalities and a Terrible Secret. The split in Jung's nature became more pronounced as he grew older. Personality number 1 went to school, tried to fit in, and failed at mathematics. This was the boy who got into fights, disappointed his teachers, and seemed destined for an ordinary life. But personality number 2 lived in another realm entirely. This was the ancient one, the part of him that knew things without learning them, the part that felt linked to stones, mountains, and the centuries before him. School was painful, not because Jung lacked intelligence, but because he could not reconcile these two worlds. During a geometry lesson, his teacher accused him of cheating on a paper. Jung had not cheated, but he could not prove it. The injustice burned. More than that, it confirmed his suspicion that the outer world of rules and proof had little to do with the deeper truth he felt inside. At 12, something shifted. A classmate shoved him, and Jung's head struck the pavement. He remained there longer than necessary, and a thought flashed through his mind. Now you won't have to go to school. For 6 months after that, he had fainting spells whenever school approached. His parents became desperate, and doctors found nothing wrong. Jung overheard his father telling a friend that he feared what would become of his son if the condition continued, because there was no money to support him. Those words hit Jung like cold water. He forced himself back to his father's study, opened a Latin grammar, and immediately felt the faintness coming on. He fought it with everything he had. After an hour, it passed. He never fainted again. That was his first conscious victory over his own psyche, his first understanding that the mind could create illness and that will could also overcome it. But the terrible secret remained. The vision of God destroying the cathedral haunted Jung. He searched his father's theological books for answers and found only dead formulas. His father preached every Sunday about God's love and grace, but Jung saw doubt in his eyes. Carl Jung did not fully believe his own sermons. He was trapped in a faith that had lost its living core. Then came confirmation classes. Jung hoped for revelation, for some explanation of communion that would make the ritual meaningful. Instead, he found more empty ceremony. When he took his first communion, he felt nothing at all. The other boys seemed transported, but Jung sat there watching the wafer dissolve on his tongue and thought, "This is dead." The church had failed him. These experiences pushed him deeper into himself. He read widely and passionately: Goethe, Faust, Schopenhauer, Kant. Through these writers, he realized that other thinkers had also felt the conflict between outward conformity and inner truth. He was not insane. He was seeing what others refused to see. He came to understand that life operated on two levels. Most people lived on the surface, but underneath, in the depths, moved forces that churches and schools never mentioned. These were the forces that could shatter cathedrals, heal fainting boys, and speak through dreams of underground chambers. Chapter 3. The Call to Psychiatry. Jung entered Basel University in 1895 at the age of 19, still uncertain about his future. Medicine seemed practical, and his family did not have money for anything impractical. But beneath that practical choice ran a deeper current. He wanted to understand the strange experiences that had shaped his childhood. He wanted to know why minds split apart, why God appeared in dreams, and why fainting spells could disappear through sheer will. In 1896, his father died. Carl Jung had lost his faith years earlier, and now he lost his life. The family was left with almost nothing. At 20, Jung became responsible for his mother and sister. His uncle told him bluntly that this was how a man learned responsibility. Jung sold antiques on commission and worked as an assistant. When money ran low, he often ate only one meal a day. Then came events that seemed impossible to explain. One day, Jung sat studying with his mother in the dining room when they heard a sound like a gunshot. Their solid walnut table, 70 years old, had split cleanly in two. There had been no temperature change, no visible strain in the wood, only a sudden crack through the center. 2 weeks later, another shock followed. In the sideboard, a steel bread knife had shattered into 4 pieces. The blade lay broken in the drawer, surrounded by untouched linens. These events drew Jung toward the occult, not as a believer, but as an investigator. His relatives held seances with a young cousin who claimed to channel spirits. Jung attended with a notebook and recorded everything. The girl spoke in different voices, claimed past lives, and described the structure of the spirit world. Most of it was clearly imagination, but now and then something seemed to break through. Some knowledge she should not have had, some expression on her face that felt beyond performance. Meanwhile, medical school moved through surgery, internal medicine, and pathology, but Jung felt no real calling to any of it. On the eve of his final exams, still undecided about a specialty, he picked up a psychiatric textbook by Krafft Ebing. In the introduction, he read that psychiatric texts reflected the subjective views of their authors more than other medical books, and that psychiatry was the stepchild of medicine, working in darkness and earning little respect. That was the moment. Psychiatry was where natural science met the spiritual world. It was where doctors dealt with the same forces that had split his table and broken his knife, where the human soul appeared in all its terrible complexity. His friends were horrified. Psychiatry was considered professional suicide. The asylums were dumping grounds, and the patients were seen as hopeless. Jung did not care. He had found his calling. In 1900, he accepted a position at the Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich. At 24, he stood before its locked doors carrying everything he owned in a single suitcase. Behind those doors waited the mad, the broken, and the people who lived in the same divided world he had known since childhood. He was coming home. Chapter 4. Bergholzli and the Unconscious. The Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital stood on the hillside above Zurich, and when Jung arrived in December 1900, the grounds were covered in snow. It was a modern, forward-thinking institution, and under Eugen Bleuler's leadership, it had become one of the most respected psychiatric centers in Europe. Bleuler believed patients should be understood, not simply controlled, and that approach immediately drew Jung in. Even so, Jung felt completely overwhelmed. He later admitted that he understood almost nothing at first. His medical training in Basel had not prepared him for this kind of work. He lived at the hospital among patients and staff, and for 6 months he read obsessively through dozens of volumes from the Allgemeine Zeitschrift für Psychiatrie, along with every case history he could get his hands on. He needed to understand what madness actually was. Beyond the official diagnoses and medical terms, the patients themselves taught him more than any textbook ever could. One of them was Babette, an elderly woman who had spent years inside the institution. She spoke in strange, tangled phrases that most doctors dismissed as nonsense. Jung listened differently. He looked for structure in the disorder. When she called herself the Laylapse, or said that Naples and I must supply the world with noodles, he sensed that the speech was not random at all. To him, these were symbolic expressions from a mind that had withdrawn into its own mythic world. Then came the word association experiment, and everything began to change. Jung and Franz Ricklin refined the test by paying attention to the reactions others ignored. When Jung said a word like mother, and a patient took 12 seconds to answer kind, that delay meant something important. It suggested that something emotionally charged and unresolved had been touched. In that moment, the unconscious revealed itself. It could be measured. It could be demonstrated. Jung repeated the experiment on himself and on colleagues, and it became clear that everyone had complexes. The difference between healthy people and disturbed ones was not the existence of complexes, but their intensity. A normal person might hesitate slightly. A neurotic person might become confused. A psychotic person might be completely overtaken. In psychosis, the complexes had become autonomous. They seemed to live their own lives, producing voices and visions. One case stayed with Jung for years. In 1904, a brilliant multilingual woman named Sabine Spielrein arrived in the hospital in a state of screaming panic and resistance. She was intelligent, gifted, and tormented by violent sexual and aggressive fantasies. Jung spent long hours with her, not as a distant observer, but as someone willing to enter her inner world. She improved significantly and later became a psychoanalyst herself. But the intensity of the relationship also showed Jung how dangerous this work could be. A doctor could be affected by a patient's madness, or perhaps discover his own in the process. It was this experience that helped lead Jung toward Freud. Freud's interpretation of dreams confirmed much of what Jung had been seeing. The unconscious had its own logic, and dreams were not meaningless but compensatory, balancing the conscious mind. When Jung read Freud, he felt less isolated. Here was another explorer of the dark territory. In 1906, Jung sent Freud his studies on word association, and Freud responded with enthusiasm. Their correspondence began. But even then, Jung had his doubts. Freud explained too much in terms of sexuality and childhood trauma. Jung was seeing patients whose delusions contained mythological material they had never studied. One schizophrenic man described visions that matched ancient sacred traditions. How could that be reduced to personal sexual conflict? Jung began gathering these parallels more carefully. The patients at Berghutzli were not simply ill. They were submerged in the same mythic material that mystics and visionaries had encountered throughout history. During this period, Emma re-entered his life more fully. He had first met her as a student and felt instantly that they would marry, and in 1903 they did. Emma came from the wealthy Rauschenbach industrial family. which relieved Jung of financial pressure but created new strains. She had to accept that her husband might disappear into his study for long stretches, or suddenly announce that they were holding seances in the house, or that patients would be staying with them. She responded by studying mathematics, Latin, and later psychology, trying to enter his world. By 1905, Jung had become senior physician. He had his own wards and assistants. He introduced work therapy, encouraging patients to do meaningful tasks instead of remaining idle. He noticed that even paranoid patients often improved when given responsibility. The therapeutic environment itself could become healing. But Jung was growing restless. The hospital setting felt restrictive. He wanted freedom to pursue the larger patterns he was seeing, the mythic side of madness, the collective layers beneath individual symptoms. His reputation spread, and doctors from America came to learn the association method. Jung lectured, published, and gained recognition, but inwardly he felt a widening split. The medical model explained too little. Diagnosis and classification missed the meaning within madness. Every patient seemed to be living out a story, a myth connected to something deeper than personal history. After 9 transformative years, Jung resigned from Bergholzli in 1909. He had learned what institutional psychiatry could teach him. Now he needed to move into territory no hospital could contain. Carl Jung had arrived at Bergholzli with one suitcase and left with something far heavier. The growing certainty that the madness he was treating in his patients was connected to something ancient, universal, and alive in every human being. He had the word association test. He had Freud's letters. He had his patients' mythological visions. And he had a restlessness that no hospital could contain. But the real storm was still coming. Because in part 2, Jung would do the unthinkable. He would walk away from the most powerful man in psychology, risk his entire career, and then deliberately choose to step into the abyss of his own unconscious. If you want to know what he found there, part 2 is waiting. Don't miss it.